Major funding for the production of the City Club Forum is provided by Nordson Corporation, a world leader in systems that apply adhesives, sealants, and coatings during manufacturing operations to make today's products work better and last longer. Additional support is provided by the Nord Family Foundation.
Welcome to the Friday Forum of the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Rick Taft, President of the City Club Forum Foundation, and we are pleased to have you join us today. The City Club has a long history of dealing with controversy. Among the most consistently controversial issues are those which concern relations between labor and management, between workers and bosses. These are not easy topics. Labor struggles in this country have by their nature been contentious and have periodically escalated into harsh confrontations and even bloodshed. We were warned of these hazards. In April 1917, Samuel Gompers, the new president of the American Federation of Labor, stood at the City Club podium and said, "A new time is coming with a new concept of social and industrial justice, freedom, democracy, and brotherhood. And like all great blessings of humanity, it's coming in a baptism of blood." Relations between the people who formed and ran the companies that became the industrial backbone of America and those who labored for them were in turmoil for years as our nation struggled to build a workable body of labor law and a culture of negotiation. The bulwark of legal rights for both sides has not extirpated labor violence, but it has driven it to rarity. Cesar Chavez told a City Club audience in November of 1969, "I would prefer not to win if we had to depend on violence." Our speaker today, Stephen Cabot, author of a book entitled "Everybody Wins," has more than 30 years' experience as a lawyer in what his biography calls the white-hot arena of management-labor strife. He has always been on the side of management. That traces to his early experience, age 16, watching in his own family the impact of labor organization on a family business, and feeling for all those years since then that he wanted to be there to speak up for the management side. In Everybody Wins, Mr. Cabot says his years of experience have led him to the conclusion that in difficult labor situations, especially those which lead to strikes, regardless of who wins the contest, the costs for everyone are too high, and ultimately everybody loses. We must, he says, radically rethink the way business formulates its vision and forge a new coalition of management, workers, and customers. Mr. Cabot received his undergraduate degree in economics from Villanova, where he was first in his class in the School of Commerce and Finance, and his law degree from the University of Pennsylvania. He worked for the federal government for several years in the field as a lawyer for the National Labor Relations Board before entering private practice. He is presently a partner in the law firm of, you gotta love these law firm names because they're so resonant, Harvey, Pennington, Cabot, Griffith, and Reinison Limited in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His practice is restricted exclusively to the representation of management in every phase of labor relations. His clients include both large and small employers in varied business sectors, in addition to companies engaged in manufacturing, transportation, and sales. Mr. Cabot represents local and municipal governments, healthcare facilities, associations of employers, and other service establishments. He has written extensively on the subject of labor management relations for both the legal and business community, and has appeared frequently on national television news and public affairs programs. The Toronto Star has described him as one of the best management-side labor lawyers in the world. Please join us in extending a warm City Club welcome to Mr. Stephen Cabot.
It's indeed a privilege and an honor to have the opportunity to be at this prestigious and historic club and to have an opportunity to share ideas. When I think of change, and as I was introduced, it was almost as though I was reliving some of the experiences that made me in part what I am, and having an opportunity to see a father who was a self-made man literally brought to his knees, his business destroyed, all because of labor strife. I remember that, and for me it's not just a matter of practicing law and representing management, because it's intellectual. Probably the best way that I can share who I am is to share from my book the reason that I wrote the book, and in the dedication, I believe it says it all. I dedicated this book to my father, who worked for a dream and gave me a cause, and to my family and to all of our children who will have a future in America bright with opportunities. I think we need to look and see how we can do things better. And when I say that, I welcome this opportunity, not just on the management side, but to the labor side as well. We all need to say that if we're looking at labor strife, if we're looking at the competition and the global economy, as we look and stare down the barrel of the millennium, we just have to find ways to do things better. Probably it was stated well in a book that I read, and I commend to you for your viewing and reading. It's a book that talks about the story of Hewlett-Packard, and the title of the book also tells it all. And the title of that book is, If It Ain't Broke, Break It. It's not that we have to do things and make change for the sake of change, but we need to find ways to change so that we can become better. The problem is really with us. We find, most of us, I believe, if we live long enough, that we sometimes are our own worst enemies. When I think of change, I think of the world made up of three types of people. People who watch things happen, people who make things happen, and people who get hit over the head and say, what happened? And I think that we need to remember the three types of people in this world. We need to ask ourselves, in what category do we fall? And when we talk about falling, I think we need to talk about togetherness and teamwork on both sides of the ledger, management and labor. And when I think of togetherness, and I think of the fact that if we don't work together in our world, in our corporate society, and in our society for every person who lives in this great world called America, we will find ourselves a second-class power if we don't remember our lessons of history. And perhaps the lessons of history go back as far as Benjamin Franklin. I think even further. But Benjamin Franklin said it all very well. And when he said it with gusto. We will all hang together, or assuredly, we will hang separately. And we need to find ways not to hang, but to work together. When I think of working together, we need to have a vision. We need to have commitments. We need to have the guts and the courage to do what's right, even when we face adversity. We need to have a dream. We need to have a dream very much like Martin Luther King. We need to have a dream so that all of us in our society and for all of our families, we will grow. And that requires guts. And that requires, like in Hewlett-Packard, if it ain't broke, break it. It means that we have to find a way in working together to change. But we must dream, because we must dream to reach the highest star in the sky. And all we have to do when we think about dreaming, beyond my dream, it's got to be a dream that we all can buy into. And when I think of dreaming, I remember the story of Giuseppe. See, Giuseppe was a gentleman whose father had a dream for him. Giuseppe's father wanted Giuseppe and all of the children to be fishermen. And Giuseppe told his dad at a very young age, fish made him sick. So that when he went out on the fishing boat, he got sick. And finally, Giuseppe had to tell his dad he wasn't going to be a fisherman. And with that, Giuseppe's father said, you're a Giuseppe good for nothing. And I'm going to throw you off the boat, and I'm going to have nothing to do with you ever again. So Giuseppe left the boat, and he went out into the streets, and he did everything he could to earn money for his family. He shined shoes, he ran errands, he did everything he possibly could to earn money during some tough times in the early parts of the 19th century, or the 20th century rather. And Giuseppe took the money that he earned, shining shoes, and gave it to his family. And his father still remembered Giuseppe didn't have the dream to be a fisherman. He was thrown off the boat, and he was still referred to as Giuseppe good for nothing. So Giuseppe found themselves in the streets, and he found that there was a game that he liked, stickball. So he played stickball in the streets as a young boy. And he found that his hands were fast, and his eyes were fast, and his feet were fast, and he was the best stickball player, the best in the streets. And Giuseppe decided to live his dream. It was a dream that finally achieved accomplishments beyond belief. At what point Giuseppe's father cried at the pride he had in Giuseppe's accomplishments. And Giuseppe's brothers followed him into a trade where Giuseppe became famous. And thanks for Giuseppe and trying to follow his dream, the world and this country became better. Because if it wasn't for Giuseppe following his dream, Joe DiMaggio wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. So when we're trying to think of ourselves in our dream, let's think of Giuseppe. And when we think of Giuseppe, and we have to say, what is our mission? What is our dream? What is our commitment? What is our challenge? We need to think of change as we head to the millennium, because the challenges facing management and labor and all of us will become greater than we ever imagined. When we think of change, let's go back only a few years when the life of a computer was maybe 3 or 3.5 years. And now the life of a computer is less than 9 months. Technological change is becoming greater than the challenges we faced as we remember the Industrial Revolution. See, but our challenge with this is growth and prosperity. But at what cost? Because as we enter the technological change, we need to think about preparation and retraining. Because if we don't, and we can't meet that challenge, then what happens is that technology will produce layoffs. And the cities like Cleveland cities like Pittsburgh, the steel belts, the coal towns, when work can be done through technology, it will mean fewer employees, potentially, without retraining. And if we're not careful, what it could mean, and as we're beginning to see today, more strikes. So how will we face and deal with the changes of technology as we head into the millennium? We also, when we look at our challenge, we have a society where over 50% of all working Americans are women. Men who used to rule the roost are working for women and suing their boss for sexual reverse harassment. And how do we deal with that? Men, how do we deal with the challenge? And women, how do we deal with the challenge? I'm not certain I know yet, but I know the question and in part the challenge. Using computers mean that people work at home. So to what extent will bosses monitor employees who are working at home? And to what extent in this technological age can we protect the rights of privacy of employees or any one of us? Technology also produces companies like the New York Stock Exchange. Companies who have never earned a dime are now at $50 a share. And companies are taking workers and making them worker owners by giving them stock. Is that the end of labor unions? How will labor react to that? Will labor react to the change with fists, or will labor react to the change in a way to say, I don't want to be extinct like the dinosaur, so maybe it has to change? How about the new technology, the internet, email, voicemail, employees while at work using email to harass outsiders? How do we protect the company, the employees, and the harassment from outsiders? Another of our challenges as we head to the millennium. What are the ways in which we must tackle this problem? Well, the first is, bosses, wake up. You will fail. You will lose. You'll lose your competitive advantage unless you find a way to care, unless you find a way to show that you care, unless you plan to implement a type of new worker society, a new management society, one where the worker is an equal, one where the worker feels involved and is part of the team, where labor interfaces in this problem, is the stop the we versus they. It can't be a we versus they if we're going to beat our competition, which is the enemy. We've got to do it together, and we have to do it together as a team. So bosses, when you plan, how do you plan? Well, it's something interesting when we plan. God gave us one mouth and two ears, so perhaps as part of planning, we ought to listen twice as much as we speak. But bosses like to hear themselves speak. So to what extent will we practice the most important word, or one of the most important words in the English vocabulary? In a wonderful book written by a prolific publisher, author, self-made man, Martin Edelstein, he wrote a powerful book called I Power. And I Power says the way in which we need together to find a way together to solve our mutual problems is to practice the three-letter word that begins with A. Easy to remember. It's called ask. Ask. Power, knowledge, is what will make the difference between success or failure. When we ask, we don't have to guess. We don't have to deal with perceptions, which are reality. We can ask how people feel and know what the perceptions are so that we, in management, can assume the challenge of influencing perception in an honest, practical, effective way. Another challenge to the management community. And when we listen, we can feed back information and ideas, just like the forum today. It's sharing ideas whether we agree or disagree. But to come to a problem and with a built-in bias and say, I disagree, means failure. The failure to listen, the failure to try is the definition of failure. So when we respond, Mr. Employer, when we're trying to build this new society of workers and management, how do we do it? What do the employees need? What will our commitments be to our employees? There have been companies, some great companies, that are part of another wonderful book called The 100 Best Managed Companies in America. I don't need to make history, I can share it. And it deals with three things that management must remember, but we all need to remember as well. It's a story of the 3 R's. It's that what we do and what we say, we walk the talk, Mr. Employer, Mr. Union. We need to do what we say. We need to build 1 R, recognition. 2, the second R, we need to continue to repeat and repeat. And the third R, we need to do those things to reinforce that we care, because it's not lip service, it's that we really do care. Why do we do this? Because in the new society of workers, employees, members of the corporate society, we all want in. We don't want to be in left field. We want to all be the pitcher. We want to be on the pitching mound. And if we're not on the pitching mound, we also want to be where the action is. We want to be the catcher. So we all want in. So we need to ask, and we need to involve. And we need them when we plan to set forth as part of our new manifesto. And I welcome and urge labor unions around this world to come with me, hand in hand. And what we're all going to try to do is to achieve what I call a very simple, it's what we all call a mutual respect. A mutual respect. Let us think of work because we spend more time at work than we do with our families. So let's look at work as just an analogy to another type of family. And we look at the type of respect that we would give our mothers, our fathers, our children, our spouses. Would we mistreat any one of those who we love so dearly? We spend less time with them than our fellow compadres at work. So why wouldn't we join in this manifesto of moving forward together to treat ourselves, to treat each other with the same respect that we would give to our own mothers and fathers? There are really a few other elements in the manifesto. The first is, and I mentioned it briefly earlier, we do not have to agree with each other. If we have mutual respect, then we can work toward acceptance. And how do we reach acceptance? We do it through understanding. Because if you understand, pardon the word I'm going to use, and I'm going to use it because I want you to remember it. If you think that I'm going to be a bastard, that I can't be trusted, then you'll never, ever accept what I ask due to the lack of trust, you will not be able to reach that level of understanding that if you know that I may disagree and we may disagree, but my motives are not ulterior, they are for our mutual good, you're going to give me a shot. And that's what I ask of you, and that's what I ask of every person within the new society that has to meet the changes that are needed for us to move forward. There are several things, however, that we must all understand in building a type of workforce environment that will allow us to be pro-employee, pro-employer, pro, not anti. We, not we, they. And that is, we must work on effective communication. We must work on the mutuality of trust. We must work on building our society with policies and supervisory practices that are perceived and, in fact, are fair and even-handedly applied. We must walk the talk to be part of a team. We must also make the workplace the best place at which to work, so we build morale, so that people will want to come to work. We as an employer, as part of the quid pro quo, must do this training and retraining. It is our obligation so that we can avoid the strikes due to workplace displacements that will occur as the technological age grows and becomes even more sophisticated. And, not last or least, but within those 7 factors to which we must commit to pay our employees in a fair and comparable, competitive way to other people who perform like type of jobs in the community. We're talking about a manifesto. I don't want to live. I don't ever want to live again what I lived through when I was a teenager. Yes, I dedicated my life to help management, to make sure there would never be another employer that ever lived through what my father did, who almost died. No, I will not let that happen, is my commitment and pledge. But I can't do it alone. I need your help. We need to be able to say to our employees, in the context of embracing them, we have to give them a challenge. We need to say to an employee, to all of our employees, to all of us, if you were the president of our company for a day, what would you do to improve relationships, to make the workforce environment better, a better place at which to work? If you were the president, what would you do? Because we need to have those role reversals. We need to work together. And it's not lip service. A lot of people look at me and they say, Steve Cabot, he's a union buster. No, I'm no more a union buster than Lane Kirkland is a company buster. If Kirkland was right up here, I'm sure he would say he's not a company buster. I think he, and I'm going to give him that same challenge. He could stand up here at some day right next to me, shoulder to shoulder. And we don't have to bust each other's heads. What we can do is find a way to make our system work. I'm going to share a story with you, and it's the story that hopefully will help you understand and remember what we've said today. It's the story of a husband and wife who are asleep. It's 3 o'clock in the morning and it's raining and it's cold. You can remember some of those days yourselves. And there's a loud knock on the door. The wife says to the husband, "Honey, could you go downstairs and see who's at the door?" The husband reluctantly pulls himself out of bed at 3 a.m. and he goes down, and there's a man at the door who's so totally inebriated. And he's mumbling, and he says, "Could you please give me a push? Could you please give me a push?" as he's stammering through alcohol. The man says, "Get the heck out of here," and slams the door in the gentleman's face. So the husband goes upstairs and gets back in the bed, and the wife says, "Well, honey, what happened? Who was there?" And the husband says, "Well, there was this gentleman who was so drunk. He asked me for a push, and I said, 'Get out of here.'" The wife said, "Honey, don't you remember one day when it was raining and our car broke down and all we needed was some help and a push, and we went to a neighbor's house, also, as you may remember, 2 or 3 a.m., and the neighbor was so gracious and gave us a push. So, honey, could you please go down and help this gentleman if you can?" So the husband says, "Okay, I'll try." Goes downstairs, opens the door, and he doesn't see or hear this drunk. So the husband yells out to the drunk, "Where are you? I'm trying to help you. Where are you?" And from a slight distance, the words come, "I'm right over here in the back. I'm on your swing. Could you please give me a push?" I hope my talk today has given you a push. I hope that you realize, as I said in my book, when I ended my book, and I said, this is a time for change. It's a time for courage. It's a time or prescription for courage when only courage will do. We don't have a long time, but we have time enough. The time enough is our challenge. It's up to us. And I think we will do it. We will make it, because we have too much to lose to fail.
Thank you, Mr. Cabot. Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to Mr. Stephen Cabot, a nationally prominent labor attorney and author of the book, Everybody Wins. We will return to Mr. Cabot in just a few moments for some questions and answers. But first, a few announcements. We welcome you to this Friday forum, the longest continuously running free speech forum in the country. Our greetings go to those present in this room as well as those watching on WVIZ-TV, Channel 25, and Cablevision, and those listening to WCLV 95.5, or to one of the more than 440 radio outlets in the City Club Broadcast Network, generously sponsored by Eaton Corporation. Information about upcoming City Club programs is now available on the Internet. There are several ways to reach us. Our homepage is cityclub.org. You can also find us at cleveland.com or WCLV.com. At our forum next Friday, October 15th, we will have David Cerrone, the president of the Cleveland Institute of Music. The following Friday, October 22nd, our speakers will be two very prominent diplomats, Mr. Daniel Ashbel, Consul General of the State of Israel, and Mr. Hassan Abel Rahman, Chief Representative of the PLO and Palestine Authority in Washington. This will be an extraordinary opportunity to hear two rather different perspectives on the future of Israeli-Palestinian relations. We hope you will be there. For more information about the club, or to order a tape of today's programs, or to make reservations for upcoming programs, please call 223-6786 or 216-621-0082. As most of you know, the club will be undergoing a substantial renovation beginning in 1 month, and November 1st forward, our programs will be held across the street at Sammy's Metropolitan Club on the top floor of the Huntington Building. City Club members will receive soon in the mail news about this exciting project and our plans during reconstruction. Today's forum is the annual City Club Forum on the American Justice System. It recognizes a generous grant to the Forum Foundation by 5 prominent Cleveland lawyers: Paul Walter, Sam Glassman, David Sindel, Robert Fay, and Mike Crottinger. Also, with us today are student guests as part of the City Club student program. They will attend the forum and meet with the speaker afterwards. The program is funded in part by a special challenge grant from the Jeffrey David Epstein Memorial Fund. Today we welcome students from the Health Career Center, Max Hayes, and Lincoln West High School. Would they please rise to accept our greeting? Now we would like Mr. Cabot to return to our podium for our traditional City Club question and answer period. He has raised an issue that touches on the relationship of our country to the entire world and its internal success. We look forward to a good set of questions. We welcome questions from everyone, guests included. Jim Foster holds the microphone at the front, and Nan Alexander holds the microphone in the rear. First question, please. Mr. Cabot.
Mr. Cabot, Henry Ford supervised a factory that produced cars, millions of cars. And these cars were used all over the world. And the money that these cars created in small amounts was doled out to some laborers that produced those cars. However, nowadays you have an industry like Microsoft where a man creates for himself hundreds of billions of dollars, $100 billion, and actually there is no product except some ideas marketed, and there are very few laborers connected with that. If Ford or Edison created a lot of money, it was later on doled out to institutions and to help the country. What is happening to the money that these people that have such intellectual power to create these, like Microsoft, things like Microsoft, what happens to the product and the money that these products create?
I think that you've touched on a very sensitive and well-meaning and difficult issue. I can cite, by way of illustration, Bill Gates, where he announced approximately 2 or 3 weeks ago where he donated, I believe the figure was $20 billion. I believe that what Mr. Gates has done is hopefully setting an example that other people who have benefited through technology can do as well. The challenge, however, is in part, sir, what I was raising earlier in my discussion, and that is retraining. And we see this on the auto assembly lines, how greater technology is being used and how there are work opportunities if we work together to make those opportunities more real than fictional. And actually, through technology, we can achieve some real pluses because the type of jobs that will be available through new technology will be higher paying, hopefully more interesting jobs. But it's not going to be easy. We have a lot of work ahead.
You mentioned working together. I come from a background in which my father had to work for the auto companies in the 30s, became a shop steward. As I learned civics, my father used to come home occasionally with black eyes and bruises on his body. And I used to ask him why as a 7 or 8-year-old kid. And he said, well, we had some disagreement. They brought in some strike breakers. Today's world, we have mergers, consolidations, layoffs, and downsizing. I personally know of people who have been laid off, lose benefits, and cannot get jobs. Statistics show that there will be about an average of 7 jobs during the lifetime of people. The question is, how do you build loyalty when you have cynicism and lack of security?
I have had the opportunity, as many in my position have over the years, to try to tackle that challenge, sir. We do see that there are, in some industries, in certain areas, and in certain companies, increasing layoffs, and the involvement of employees in retraining with the help of employers is in part the same answer that I had given to the gentleman who asked the first question. However, let me raise what I think is an interesting statistic. While it is true that there are layoffs that are impacting certain areas and certain companies, our country finds itself today with the lowest unemployment rate in history. The lowest unemployment rate in history. And for that, I'm going to applaud all of you in this room and everybody in this country. That's not to minimize your question, because we cannot afford unemployment to grow. The challenges to which I referred earlier are those that we all must meet head on.
Mr. Cabot, I don't believe in blindsiding anybody, and I introduced myself to you before as one who spent 50 years of his life in the organized labor movement. I'm happy that I'm able to agree with you with the need of training and retraining workers. But I disagree strongly when you say harassment of outsiders. What do you think the first reaction is there? Of a labor organizer coming in front of a shop, harassing? I think you left the wrong impression, and if I'm misinterpreting the remark, that's fine. The other thing, you talk about labor strife, as if the only part of the battle is organized labor. If you said management labor strife, I would accept it. If you said management strife, I would accept it. But when you say labor strife, it's totally inconsistent with the rest of your presentation. You talk about unity. Let me tell you what you don't say. You've not had one good word about the labor movement per se. I listened very carefully. Does labor do anything good for the common good? Let me tell you here what some of us do. I want to ask the question. How often do you find management people making commitments like some of us make to the City Club, for example? And I already told you about that.
Let me start with your last question first. Not enough employers have made the commitment, such as the commitments that I've shared today. I believe that's changing. I believe the worldwide competitive challenges are forcing companies to rise up at a higher, more effective level in treating employees than ever before, but not enough companies yet. But I thank you, however, for giving me the opportunity to make a clarification. I don't like strife, whether it's management labor strife, labor management strife, or strife period, because when there's strife, nobody wins, no one. And that's really what I meant. It's not a one-person game. It takes two to dance in tango. The third is, just a point of clarification, when I referenced harassment, I did it in two contexts, ever so briefly, and it was not at all intended to be pejorative, attacking, for example, labor and saying labor harasses. It was in the context of how employees today are using the internet, email, to harass outsiders. And when I used harassment in an earlier context, it was in the case of sexual harassment in the workplace. It is occurring, and it has to stop.
Mr. Cabot, how can labor be happy with their wages when you read in the paper about the top CEOs with their salaries, bonuses, and stock options running into the millions? It's exorbitant. How do you answer that?
There are, yeah, you're going to get me on a tangent that's going to take us about 3 hours, but let me try, if I can, to share with you some of the problems, sir. I think it's horrifying when a CEO gets at the end of the year on the sweat of his or her employees a billion, a million, 10 million in a bonus. I'm horrified by it, except that I could feel better if the employer shared some of that wealth back, if you will, into the workplace. It is happening. I made reference to this earlier, that stock options, it's beginning to grow and permeate more than it has in the past. Hasn't happened enough. But here's part of the problem and the challenge. When there is a collective bargaining agreement, the Bill Gateses of the world cannot unilaterally give back to employees anything beyond that contained in the collective bargaining agreement without bargaining with the union, or the unilateral giving would be deemed to be a violation of the law. Many labor unions are opposed to incentives and bonuses being given to employees. There's a lot of debate about that. Some labor unions have said it's a union-busting device. Others have said it's just plain inappropriate. Some progressive labor unions have worked with management to get more of those incentive monies back to where it belongs, and that's the workforce. That's part of labor's challenge, to grow, to widen its expansive ideas, to take a little risk along with management. That's tough, sir, because labor might find that if management gives the wealth back to the employees, employees don't need organized labor anymore. That's a risk that labor may have to face in the years to come. I'm not saying explicitly that labor is going to be extinct. I'm saying labor has some risk, and it is going to have to digest that risk pretty fast, or people like yourselves are going to keep asking a very good question, like the one that you raised.
Hi. I read a very interesting article that was talking about how people who worked in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s had an average of 2.4 jobs from the time they entered the workforce until the time they retired, and that our children graduating from school now will have an average of 14.6 jobs. I understand that part of the reason for this concerns the fast pace of technological changes in making jobs disappear, as well as so many mergers and acquisitions changing the face of everything. My question is, how much responsibility for retraining and maintaining the current workforce can management be expected to assume, and how secure are the futures of the management personnel in this environment?
Well, my daughter has one job, and she made the mistake in following in her father's footsteps. She's a lawyer, and she's 31, and she's making much more than I through most of my adult life. So in a sense, what I'm saying is that this technological change, the education that people have today, give people opportunities to make more money, to have more challenges, to do more jobs. The problem when you said technology, the need to do more jobs, the needs to have more skills is, I believe, in part what you were saying. It's part of the challenge. We don't have any control as a society anymore in the context of training, retraining, the skills needed. There sadly will be a Peter principle that will come into play, and it makes me feel lousy on one level. That is that some people may not be able to cut it. But on the other hand, more people today, like my daughter, who are better educated than I was at her age. And our children are probably better educated than all of us were at that time at their respective ages, is giving us hope. It's giving us the opportunity through education and training to allow for our children a world of opportunity that didn't exist for us. Some of us are just going to have to say, it's too late for us. I hope for me, I'm not one of them. I'm trying like heck to stay ahead of the change curve. And I think that's part of the challenge for all of us. We're going to need to continue to train, retrain, sharpen our skills, get more education. It's like the story of Hewlett-Packard. How do we stay ahead of the change curve? In that book, and I'll try to make a story that's longer real quick, it's a story of two surfers. One surfer kept riding the same wave to the beach and never fell. The other surfer rode different waves to the beach and kept falling. And the two surfers met at the end of the day, and one surfer said, "You're not any good because you keep falling off the wave." The surfer who kept falling said, "No, I'm better than you because I kept taking more and more of a challenge. Learning, 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 and now I can ride waves faster, bigger, and harder than you because I took a chance." We got to be a surfer today to survive.
My name is Sean Slagle. I'm from Lincoln West. I'm a student in Lincoln West. And what us as a student body sitting here today would like to know is, can you go into some brief detail on some of the things that happened to your father that gave you such strong feelings about the union? And on the flip side, could you tell us how the children of the workers for your father felt?
I don't know how, in the latter part of the question, how the employees felt. I was very young at the time. I was about 16 years of age. I can only guess that they were out of work, so they couldn't be very happy. The union lost its members because the company went belly up. What makes Johnny run? What makes Steve Cabot tick? When my father came home one night after being debilitated, after losing his business, and he stood before me and blood was coming out of his mouth. He had a bleeding ulcer, and everything that had been festering had developed to a point where he became very sick and nearly died. And I picked him up and put him in the car and drove him to the hospital. And that's what makes me do what I do. I hope no one, whether in this room or in any room where people can meet to share ideas like we have today, will ever have to pick up their father, because he was so defeated and was almost dying and lost his pride and lost everything he worked for his entire life and felt like dying. But I tried not to let him die, and I tried not to die, so I dedicated my life for what I do today.
Mr. Cabot, there are a few different viewpoints in the labor movement itself, and you've touched on one of them today about how different viewpoints might be looking at profit sharing. Can you talk to us about some of the other trends?
Of
Union side, of the unions.
on how
In the whole union movement, there are different viewpoints. For instance, some of them sound almost like Samuel Gompers. Others sound remarkably like you. You know, so there are different viewpoints just in the union movement itself. Can you talk to us about some of those trends?
Okay. One of the challenges, and I was at a debate, it just happened coincidentally almost a week ago in Cleveland, and I debated a high-ranking official in the Steelworkers Union. And when we gave our introductory remarks, someone in the audience said, "Well, your remarks are so very similar." And I stopped and I said, in the context of what the labor union official said, I said, he has a very difficult challenge because he gets elected every couple years. And labor unions, whether we like it or not, unless they change their political organizations, and their leaders get elected. So if all of the membership feel that the union is playing lovey-dovey with management and capitulates to everything management wants, then the membership has to say, why do I need a labor union? That's the practical reality. It's part of the challenge on both sides. How can management inform its employees of the realities of life, and how can labor inform its members of some of these difficult realities of life? I don't know where these realities are taking us, whether it means that labor will get stronger or the labor movement weaker. It's the practical push-pull that unless there's controversy, many union officials feel at the grassroots level, not the rhetoric on high, where they can be statespeople, but at the grassroots, sometimes the reality is it's a battle, and the political aspect is what often drives it, sadly. It's got to change somehow. We've got to change the paradigm. We've got to break it somehow. I wish I knew how as we speak. It's going to be a bear to deal with, although, again, it's got to be part of our challenge that we say we have to find a way to change the paradigm, do things better and differently.
Thank you. Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we have been listening to Mr. Stephen Cabot, a prominent labor relations attorney and author of the book, Everybody Wins. Thank you, Mr. Cabot. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
Major funding for the production of the City Club Forum is provided by Nordson Corporation, a world leader in systems that apply adhesives, sealants, and coatings during manufacturing operations to make today's products work better and last longer. Additional support is provided by the Nord Family Foundation.